without sight. Connect, collaborate, and create.
Hello, and welcome to the Sound Without Sight podcast. This episode features a studio tour and Q&A with producer, engineer, and technology trainer Byron Harden. Byron speaks about his music career and his complex journey with sight loss, how he developed IC Music, a vocational training provider specifically aimed at blind producers and audio engineers based out of his own accessible studio, the expansion of IC Music to work with tutors and students all over the world, and future aspirations to create apprenticeships within the music and audio industries. We joined Byron at the front door of On the Moon, his studio and training facility in Illinois. We hope you enjoy. Hello, Byron.
Hey, Jay.
So we meet you right now outside your studio.
We're outside.
This is the first time we've done this. So we're going to start with a live studio tour. But I guess to begin with, how are you?
Yeah, I'm a weirdo, man. And I'm doing well. Me and my wife here, she's going to be handling the camera while we do this tour. When I say I'm a weirdo, that means that, anything that you haven't done, I'm ready to do it, right? So being in the brisk Chicago area where it's probably in the upper 30s right now, but the sun is super blazing, so we're stoked about that. And we're stoked about life, man. It's just really a blessing to be here. Amazing questions. I'm excited for these questions because these are in my wheelhouse, obviously.
Well, let's start the tour.
All right. So this is On the Moon, where IC Music is housed. We are a training facility slightly south of Chicago in a little small town called Beecher, Illinois, about 45 minutes south of downtown Chicago. And we train the totally blind, visually impaired in audio production and studio engineering as it pertains to adaptive tech. Really what we're doing is preparing individuals for their vocation or preparing them to go to school and further their education, grab degrees and things of such. This facility was built, well, let me start here. The building was built in 1896, okay? So it's a pretty solid frame building. And then we moved in 2007 and erected the studio in 2010. Started training individuals in 2014, okay? And so we do train here, like I said earlier. The thing about this is that this is not a studio that's going to look accessible. All the accessibility is under the hood, and that's very important when we start to talk about inclusion and integration. All right. So going through some French doors here, the painted gray French doors. This is about a 6-foot frame opening, so it's a double door situation. When we came in the front door, the carpet is chocolate, and the carpet in the hallway, which we're going to be walking down, is red. And that was on purpose. We did that because we wanted people to feel important when they come in, like the red carpet, right?
It's very luxurious. I like that.
Right. All right. So we're coming on down. Never mind all these CDs. These are my CDs that haven't sold from all my different bands that I've been in, right?
Yeah, we'll gloss over those.
All right. Here's our office right here. In the office is a red file cabinet on the left. This room is probably a good, I would say 15 by 15. Okay. And it's my desk over there with a bunch of computers on it. And Apple computers, of course, although we do train both on Windows and Apple equally, and probably more on Windows nowadays. So we're coming down the hallway here, a closet on the left, staircase on the right leading upstairs to an apartment where we live. First room we come to on the right is ISO room number 1. As you can see, the acoustics changed. I'm going to say C because I'm using audio. I see music, right? ISEE, right? So we see audio. Every time I say C, I'm trying to access your visual cortex through your tympanic membrane. So just stay with me, okay? So in this room, we have a workstation. This workstation looks kind of blank. It does have a Mark III machine on it. This is kind of a pre-pro room where we do a lot of pre-production at practice. We also cut in this room. This room has 8 inputs. It would be a bit difficult for me to show you those inputs based on where they're located, which is behind this desk. I'll show you that in the other rooms as we move through. This is a 32 input facility, a 4-room recording space. Also on this desk is some Roland DS50s, interfaces. I have a Zoom F6 up here. I have a Scarlett, and these are not plugged in based on, what I want to use or what somebody would want to use. Usually somebody's coming in here with a laptop, so we're getting to business that way. Right here behind me is the 2480. It's in the case. I'm not going to take it out and show you because I was using it in 2002. And so what we're doing is files off of it. So I just put it up, put it out the way. Not that it matters. ISO number 2. If you can get this on there, that would be amazing. So we label all these doors, being that we do train the totally blind here. So they're labeled in kind of raised print / braille. Okay. So all these doors are tagged with what the room is being used for. This is ISO room 2. It has a couch in it, and it is both the ISO rooms kind of mirror each other. And that means that I think they're about 87 square feet. So, these are double door systems, and I'll go into that once we get over to the other side of the hallway to more of the main stuff. As you can see right here, these are the inputs in the wall. So this is input 25 right here. And then we also have speaker cable that's running through all of the rooms for amplifiers. And so that's basically for isolation. Guitarists and bassists who want to play live with the band and don't want the amp bleed in the drums. Also as well, we have Cat 5, Cat 6, listen back ports where we can get to monitoring like we need to. And the recording subjects will be able to dial in their own mixes. We use an Aviom listen back system. All right.
Amazing. Well, I'll get links to all of these things in the notes that we put out afterwards with the recording as well.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Yeah, because,
not expecting everyone to remember everything. But I'm enjoying the whistle-stop tour of the studio. I love the braille, the tactile signage. Good stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, necessary, because so many doors, it's like, and it's such a simple layout, but people get twisted around. It's a Midwest layout, right? So, and I say that because it's just 4 corners. It's 4 corners there, 4 corners there, and not in the recording spaces, but in the main thoroughways and stuff like that. Here in this room this is the lounge room. A lot of glasses for water, coffee, whatever the case may be. Kitchenette over here. So it has a microwave, has a refrigerator, sink. This room has burnt orange suede chairs in it. They're pretty comfy. They're like club chairs. They're pretty sizable. We have an ottoman in here. We have a TV up in the northeast corner of the room. This room has 2 windows. The blinds in here are wooden color. They're wooden planks, actually. So yeah, they would be wooden color. I think they're dark, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Like a dark wood? Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of, this room has gray carpet.
I got a question, Byron, actually. Did you have the studio before you lost your sight, or what way around did that happen?
I was low vision when I designed it.
Mm-hmm.
When we first got here, there was an architect next door. And so I used him to come in and brought him over. Before I moved to actually, let me start a little bit further back. I took a couple of years and studied acoustics, studio construction. And so when we moved here, we I applied that. And so we used the architect next door. He drew it up, and voila. Here we are.
Amazing. No, it's just, I find it very impressive that you know every square inch of the building. And I guess you would, having been there for quite a while.
Oh, look, I promise you. Yeah, I have to, right? I have no choice. I'm totally blind, right? So most of the people that we train are totally blind. And this is the kind of tour that I give them, which is, it's more extensive than this. It takes about 2.5 hours for me to actually tour a person this 3,300 square feet of space, because I need them to actually know exactly what's going on. I want that visual cortex accessed. This is the basement door. You're seeing one. You're seeing them all. Oh, this is important. Fire hydrant. Oh, well, fire extinguisher. Not the hydrant. We don't want the water. We want the foam. Okay? That's important. Right? Accessibility all over the place.
Indoor temperature is 69 degrees. The thermostat setting is heat. 68 degrees.
Voila. Okay. Let's see. Here is the live room. This room is probably about 440 something square feet. There are no 90-degree angles, obviously, nor at the ceiling, the floor, or in any of the corners. We're breaking up quite a bit of the frequency as much as we possibly can. Even though these walls seem to be pretty bare, we have things like here. This is the stone, which is actually called riprap. This is what they layer river beds, the bottom of rivers, canals, and things like that, as not to have the erosion be so fast. Especially these are bodies of water that are moving, right? So
you're using that uneven surface to break up the reflections in the room and stop those kind of reflections happening.
More specifically, and this kind of handles your higher frequencies. And the reason is important is because we really want the sound to be natural. We want the source to appear natural to a very unnatural diaphragm in the microphone, right? Like, so microphones are not they're not like your eardrum, right? So as much as we can give them that sounds natural, even if we're starting to talk about processing later on down the line, because obviously you're going to change it, but especially, if you're looking at jazz music or you're looking at recording classical things of that nature, you want the instrument to sound, and so does the performer, the writer, everybody. The vocalists, they want their vocals to sound like them, which we'll talk about philosophically later for me.
Yeah, I know. I like that. It's like creating an organic sound through a bit of chaos.
Absolutely. Oh, right here. There's a candy dish right here. Okay. you see what's in there?
Nothing.
Exactly. Okay. It is. There's that. So this is a glass in this room that separates. It looks off from the control room. It's 8x4 quadruple pane sash. It's probably, I don't know, 13 inches thick. And the different panes are angled for a couple of reasons. The main reason is for sound transfer to be lowered. And then the other reason is for clarity, right? So that you're able to, people who can see, it could have been just one thick piece of glass for me and I'd been okay with it, or a wall. I'd been all right with that. But sighted people say, no, Byron, we want to be able to see each other. I said, okay, that's fine. We'll allow that. In this room, there's 16 more inputs, a couple of, Cat5 connections. I don't need a lot of Cat5s because I can daisy chain all the listen back boxes together. Again, we got speaker cable in here for amps. Then we got outputs as well in here. I'm not a big fan of my panel, but it is what it is. I've had it redone a couple of times, and each time it got better. But the thing I don't like about it, that I don't think that it's not flexible enough, right? I would tell people to, put everything you think you're going to need in it, and I didn't do that. However, so this cabling, so I have cable hooked up for those that cannot see. Just a few, probably, let me see, 4, 6, 8, 10. I got 10 cables, and I have a drum set in here. This is a Catalina 99, Gretsch Catalina, and it's mic'd up. It's a basic miking scheme. Okay, so I'll come over to the kit here. So I have 2 crash cymbal, 19-inch crash and this is coming from the drummer's perspective. A 19-inch crash on the left and a 22-inch ride on the right, and they're both mic'd up with SM57, believe it or not. And the reason that's the case is because the 19-inch crash is a soul tone. It's a very dark sound, and it has a lot of sustain on it, right? A lot of overtones, and I feel that the spot miking my crash cymbals with a 57 really narrows it in quite a bit. Over here, the hi-hat is mic'd up with an RE20 underneath, and these are Sabian hi-hats, really cool hi-hats with kind of like a baffled bottom to it, kind of texturized top, and those are AA, kind of bright. So the RE20 being also a little bright and brittle up top, it allows me some articulation that I can dial back in the mix. I hate the way the 57s or I don't even like condensers on hi-hats. It's just, it hurts my feelings, right? And I've talked about that stuff later. Here also as well, on the snare drum, the snare's mic'd on the top and the bottom. I'm using the Beta 98 small diaphragm. That is a condenser on the top. And then on the bottom is a SM57. Again, kick drum is mic'd up, which ported on the front. And this port is really interesting because it's dead center, 4-inch port on a kick drum head, on the resonant head. And it's a Beta 52 in there. I love that. That's my favorite kick drum mic. The D112 is my second favorite if I'm doing like a lot of rock stuff. 12-inch tom, that's mic'd up with a Beta 98. The floor tom is mic'd up with a Beta 181. Okay. Which is also a small diaphragm condenser.
Awesome. I think it's great to have just a kind of permanent default setup on the drums. Just means you can get going really quickly. Just looking at time, Byron, I think we should probably move into the control room and then get into some questions after that.
Absolutely. So come out of there, come into the control room. This is all centered around Pro Tools, which the Avid HDX and the Aurora Lynx. I do have, as far as preamps are concerned, I have APIs and Neves and Avalon M5s as far as, getting inputs in. Then I have Audient stuff as well for more, more basic recordings, things like that. MIDI controller, of course, you need that. Console 1, the MIDI controller is the MK2, complete control. Console 1 controller and HS80. This was the first iteration after the NS10s, right? And then a bunch of guitars, Mac Mini, 64 gig RAM, 2018 Mac Mini, still there. And a bunch of hard drives, a ton of them. And I'm almost embarrassed to how many is just laying around up there. Like, I really, I've been talking about getting something a little bit more streamlined, but there it is, And so this room has an On the Moon sign in it, made out of wood, with a guy with the fedora sitting on the moon. I think it's a crescent, right?
Yeah.
Crescent moon, yeah.
What an amazing facility.
Yeah.
So much good stuff. And we'll dig into a bit later what makes some of that equipment more accessible than perhaps some other options. And I guess your role in some of that work as well. So I was wondering, Byron, if we could just rewind a little bit. Obviously, we've seen the studio and the great facility that you've got. But if we look now a little bit about your background and your career and the pathway that's kind of got you to this point, I wondered if you could give us a little overview of your kind of personal journey with being a musician, being a producer, and with sight loss as well.
Yeah, so I have a pretty weird story. So I lost my sight at 7 due to Stephen Johnson's. I received an injection of penicillin while having chickenpox. And before that, I was just, full able-bodied kid running around causing trouble. And went home that night this was on Christmas, after receiving the injection. And my birthday, which is the day after Christmas, I woke up on my birthday and I started noticing that my vision was leaving pretty quickly. And, woke my mom up, took me to the hospital, and then I fell into a coma for about 40 days. So what happened was the breakdown of the mucous membranes was taking place. So the retina was detached completely from that in my right eye. In the left eye, they sewed the eye shut in order to keep the ventris contained. So I stayed shut until I was 16, had a cornea transplant. That was in Richmond, Virginia. I lost the sight in Chicago, actually. And in Richmond, Virginia, I gained it back due to cornea transplant and enough eyesight in order to drive. So landscaping, once I graduated high school, in order to support my music habit, right? And then I moved into, at 35, I had a keratosis prosthesis, which is an artificial cornea. So the whole front of my left eye is artificial. And my sight was amazing from there. It went to like 2010 as far as the visual acuity was concerned. So that lasted for 3 good years. And because it was artificial, keeping track of the pressure was not really I guess it wasn't a well thought out system based on they did not implant a shunt to keep the pressure in the fluid circulating. And so from that, glaucoma set in, and then that caused at 38 the permanent eye loss. However, I've been playing drums since I was 4 years old. So it was, I stayed in the music. I was fearless as a kid, even when I lost my sight. I'm riding a bicycle and I'm running into parked cars. I'm sprawling all over people's hoods, and stuff like that. And, I'm this blind kid. Like, oh my God, so it's like running into bushes and tearing my knuckles up on the corner of wrought iron fences and stuff like that, but still enjoying the whole process of becoming more aware, using more of my senses, right? So, and that's why I say a lot of times, that it is a blessing to have had the sight loss in the way that I have. Being able to go in and out of sight has also created the need for the studio to be seemingly normal, but at the same time, a lot of consideration under the hood to make it adaptable, right? That also let me know that, hey, look, the sighted world and the blind world has to communicate shoulder to shoulder. They have to be able to interact, interplay.
And I think that's put you in such a good position to start thinking about how you might do that practically. And we'll come on to the training and the internships and apprenticeships later, because it's doing some really, really good work. So I think now if we maybe go to a couple of community questions, we've not done one yet. You speaking about your journey there, kind of going in and out of sight loss and I guess developing skills with sight and without sight throughout your kind of formative years. We've got an interesting question from Catherine Sturman. So Catherine is asking, what's the best way to relearn, I guess, musical skills, but also recording and production skills when someone goes through that kind of sight loss journey? And Catherine is saying that she wants to be able to quickly record music in a community setting and make high quality recordings of the young people that she's working with in her charity.
This is a really good question because I am so philosophical, right? Like, I really think that what was learned as a sighted person, honestly, was the wrong way to learn audio. This all depends on Catherine's age, right? So I come from the analog world, and things were more tactile then, right? But as they move away from the more tactile nature of audio production, it's like you got to rip down your entire thought process, all muscle memory, get rid of all of that, because now you're moving into this abstract, outer space kind of world, this way of being. And what I would say is the very first thing to get accustomed to, okay, is the technology, and do not get accustomed to it from the creative side. This is going to make you a much better productionist, right? At the end of the day, this is more about that sensory thing, that multi-sensory thing that I was talking about. Having the ability to troubleshoot on a dime. If you're the blind person in the only blind person in a session, you're the engineer. You have to be more equipped than your sighted partners that's there. So what I would say is to first unlearn everything that you knew as far as the production process is concerned. The second thing is to get really cozy with whatever screen reader that you want to get cozy with. The third thing is understand the OS backwards and forwards. Okay. Next, I would follow that all up with whatever part of audio that you want to be in. Really study that process in the recording, right? And you can do all these things simultaneously, of course. But if I had to put it in order of importance, I would say that would be where you would start, because you really have to change your mindset when it comes to operating as a blind individual.
That's amazing. Thank you. Because I lost my sight kind of a lot, but I could still see. And because I had been sighted, I kind of spent a long time trying to do it from the sighted perspective and it's not working for me anymore. So I think, thank you. Yeah. That's really good to hear.
Leave that mouse alone. Let it go into a mouse trap. Tell you, because it is not useful. As a matter of fact, a mouse is more hindering than anything else on the computer, right? Because you got to drag it across the real estate of the screen of the UI, right? Where you use keystrokes. to make things happen, you know? And this is why I think control surfaces, as much tactile as you can get, especially if you're coming from analog world, it kind of connects your mind in and you'll be able to, again, access with that audio, your visual cortex, which is now going to paste an impression of how you see the production. You can see it in your mind, the order in which you operate. And that's really important as a blind person.
Thank you.
Absolutely. That's an amazing question.
And Byron, how many students that you work with, obviously a lot of these control surfaces are quite expensive, and that can be quite a barrier to people who are just starting out and maybe they don't know if they want to commit that kind of investment to a career. How many people that you work with are just using kind of just their keyboard and their screen reader to do music production stuff?
Well, you know, about 98% of the folks that we train, they come through their vocational rehabilitation agency within their state. So the state has the purse strings to accommodate that. You know, I write recommendations based on, you know, where they're going, their vocational goals and or educational goals. And so from there, what happens is the state will purchase the equipment and we will train them on that equipment. So most of our learners have these tactile MIDI controllers and, you know, control surfaces, things like that. But what I will say is if a person does not have it, I think, you know, software like Reaper, which is, you know, OS and screen reader agnostic. I mean, it's probably one of the more incredible DAWs out there. You know, having a control surface sometimes will slow you down in like Reaper. You know, maybe even Ableton is another one that will speak to a person a productionist who doesn't have a control surface. And I remember a question, Jay, about the S1 and the dock. Yeah, and they're both amazing. That's all I have to say about that.
So that's the Avid S1. And I know, yeah, I mean, that Avid did some work with some blind users on that. I don't know if you were one, Byron. I know that they did some work with Jason Dasent on that. And actually a lot of that same work carried over to the Softube console one as well.
It did, yeah. Yeah, the implementation is pretty cool on the S1. I use the C24, which is a dinosaur, but I can't let it go. And I can't let it go. It's just a $10,000 mouse. That's all it is, right? But at the end of the day, to have 24 faders, because when we're talking about fader flip mode, which, you know, the S1 does do, that allows for us to have a textual representation of the parameters of a plugin, especially using the most brilliant flow tools created by three very bright gentlemen. And you know, they had the wherewithal to put something in place that really enhanced the workflow of a blind user in Pro Tools. And then the flow tools being able to query and have the access to, okay, yeah, this parameter is here and this is the value of it. Wow, that's brilliant, you know. So that in combination with that tactile representation really speeds things up exponentially.
Amazing. Just a quick one from Vera Caras, who is asking, are you involved in accessibility within music tech? So are you working with manufacturers and companies to make stuff more accessible? Are there any particular projects that you can talk about there from past or present?
Yeah. Beta tester for a few softwares, Pro Tools being one of them. You know, I don't do much with it now, just being so deep into administration, plus, you know, getting more into my creative side. But I definitely, you know, a lot of our sponsors, we didn't have sponsors based on, you know, in kinds, cash or products or anything like that. It was the information, it was the inside information that we cared about, because we really was hell bent on allowing blind folks to be adjacent to and be submersed in longevity as far as accessibility. If anyone, you know, who is familiar with blindness and OSs and screen readers, once the update comes, you know, something's breaking, right? And so we need to know exactly what those things are. And so companies have been really gracious and really helpful with that information and allowed us, you know, some access that they just don't really allow the general public. Right now, I'm kind of working on some pretty intense projects. One is in brain-computer interfacing, where we're hoping to get production to a point to where you can just think your way to the final product and accessing that through EEG technology and stuff like that. So that's a big deal for me right now.
I mean, that would be a huge, huge development, and yeah, definitely one for the future. So a couple of questions now from Lynn Davis. So Lynn is asking about, obviously you've got a great studio space and she's hoping to set up an accessible studio in future as well. What's the most effective way to source equipment that is accessible? Because sometimes it's difficult to find that information.
I would call Sweetwater and talk to Jeffrey Green. They do ship, I believe, they ship to the UK, right? Or I don't know where Lynn is, but they ship a ton of places globally. And Jeffrey he's been working with us since 2015. And so, that was another part of the Sweetwater deal as far as them being a sponsor of ours. We shared a lot of intel, what's accessible and things like that. I met with them constantly met with Chuck Surak, their marketing department, and of course, Jeffrey Green on, hey, this is accessible. Don't recommend that. Don't do this. Because as of right now, to be honest, Lynn, all this stuff is so fragmented. We are working on, a repository that will be able to have information aggregated in one location for anyone, free information that deals with accessible DAWs and equipment and practices and free tutorials around this thing, around those types of things, navigating those items and software and the spaces.
Awesome. And is that through IC Music?
So that's through our foundation, right? So IC Music Foundation. Both these websites are under construction based on the rebranding and the new direction that we're going. So you can check us out on LinkedIn, which is IC Music LLC, or you can check us out on IG, same thing, IC Music LLC. I'm not really tweeting nowadays, not really on Facebook that much, but there is some training documents or documenting videos there on especially on the IG site. Not so much on LinkedIn. LinkedIn just kind of talks about a bit about what we do and stuff like that. But yeah, so it's through our foundation that kind of stuff, that programming exists.
Cool. Well, I would love to promote all of those resources once they're done and perhaps even collaborate on them in the meantime. So that there's a massive crossover with what we want to do with Sound Without Sight there as well. Absolutely. Amazing. Well, maybe we can thrash a little bit out now because we've got a few specifics. So a question from Star. She is asking about any specific plugins that you find particularly good for accessibility.
In audio production, plugins. So this is kind of a ubiquitous kind of aim, right? It depends on in what area. I think I'm going to I think I saw a question about tuning. So I'm going to go there. So if you're in Reaper, right, which we love Reaper because number one, the cost of entry is low, right? It's like $60 for the license. That's USD. Two, there's a ton of support. Derek Lane, Scott Chesworth, Gianluca Alpolero. These guys are probably the most brilliant cats I know. Garth Humphreys, all around Reaper, right? So, and there's an entire community that's there. I believe Reaper, you can tune vocals with just like a keystroke, so I would say for a more streamlined approach, I say you might want to get into Reaper if you're not already in the DAW. But if you're already in the DAW, Wave Tunes is good. Pro Tools has integrated some things that make sense. I don't have a new license for Pro Tools now, so I don't know if this is still the case. But they had Auto-Tune was there.
Dude, they've actually got an integration of Melodyne now as well, where you can go in and edit individual notes.
Yeah, which is pretty cool, and Slough, my buddy, Slough Hallison, he had created some macros that make sense to workflow to that, to kind of streamline that a little bit further. But, man, these questions like that are a bit difficult to answer because so many variables need to be considered. The user, which is the main variable, right? Like the user. Then the user's direction, the user's capabilities, the tools that the user has. All these things, the environment, the production, there's just so many more things that, the actual access that someone has to assistance readily available. Those things that really matter to a blind user in these apps.
I think over time as well, the conversation will be becoming more which plugins aren't accessible with all the developments to
Right.
juice that are making accessibility much more easy to engage with on the development side. Obviously, it still takes effort, and the companies need to do a bit of learning.
Absolutely.
But it's a lot less learning than they would have to do 10 years ago.
And you know what? You know what else, though, Jay? On that, I think that's a really amazing point. Accessibility is becoming, it's hard to say that word because you say it so much, right? But it's becoming a thing, and this is really my direction. It's really universal design. Like I said, I don't think that the sighted way of production is that optimal. I think they've adapted it and made it, an amazing world for sighted folks and audio production. Things are much easier there, but I'm saying the inherent workflow doesn't make sense. So, I'm interested in changing that, right? The entire way that things are done in audio production. And then I think that introduces the lack of trying to adapt into, which then now, if we do that, people are able to really concentrate on creativity and not so much the technology.
Cool. And you might have answered this one there, kind of, but just to push a little bit further, Chris Turner is asking a question from the other end, really. And so Chris is asking, if you could change one area, one category or tool or application overnight to make it fully accessible to blind producers, what would that be? Where's the biggest pain point at the moment? What needs the most attention right now?
Yeah. And Chris, I appreciate that question. It is exactly what I said. That's my number one goal, really, which is why creating the foundation, the nonprofit, was so important to me. The workflow, it just doesn't make sense. I would also say the teaching methods around audio production, especially in the world of blindness, right? I think that blind individuals need to be ready to learn multiple DAWs. If we're talking about adaptation, the reason I say that is because, Logic Pro is great at what it does, which is more producer driven and, composition, electronic composition oriented. Whereas Pro Tools Reaper is more for your audio guys and young ladies who are getting into recording, live instrumentation, things like that, mixing, editing. Though you can do those things in Ableton and Logic, Samplitude, things like that. But it's just the workflow, and it's all around, the framers, the drafters who design these softwares. I think that if I could say the issue was one word, I would say design of software, hardware, and spaces.
Cool. Thanks so much. So just to push once more on the specific pieces of software, are there any that you're able to recommend for composition or for recording? If someone had to just go and buy one right now and they want to get cracking right away, composition and recording, let's have one for each. And that's a question from Lee Strickland.
Hey, yeah. So composition, and I kind of look at that at a couple of different levels. If we're talking about just basic recording, again, that depends on a lot. In all honesty, Reaper really seems to be an entry point that really soothes people's soul, especially blind individuals, because one, the support is there. Two, now Reaper's not, before I say two, Reaper's not accessible out the box. So you have to, bring in a couple of different platforms and scripts in order for it to be as accessible as it is. But yeah, I would go there. Cost of entry is the second thing that I would say to that. Depending, and that does not matter if you're on Mac or Windows. But if you're rich and you, financially, you got a lot of money and you're going into the industry in a way that you're going to get in like post-production, or you're going to get into some type of area in production where, things are necessary, like a specific software, Pro Tools is probably going to be that. And Pro Tools costs, it's expensive, and, myself and other individuals who use it, they understand that it's a cost of doing business. If you're going into the more producer realm of things, again, EDMs and the folks who are getting into hip hop and stuff like that, rap music, things like that, beat making, sampling, Logic and Machine and Ableton, those are the areas that I would recommend.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you for the question.
Cheers, Byron. So I think I'm going to move on now. We might come back to some techie stuff at the end if there's time, but I wanted to make sure we've got enough time on the training side of things as well. A slightly philosophical one to begin with, again from Vera Caras, who is asking, do you feel that blind people are particularly interested in a music career? I guess there's that myth that every blind person is a virtuoso musician, which we know is a myth, but there's some element of truth behind some part of that potentially. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's the piano tuner question. You know what I mean? And, I think a lot of blind people are interested in audio. Music, maybe not so much, but audio, absolutely. I think more people are interested in music production now because of the ease of technology allowing them. Everybody's a producer, not, right? Everybody's an engineer. Not, I do believe that the more segmented you can become and the more specialized you can become, the more money you can make in this industry. If you own your own business, the more revenue you can draw. A person who's really good at mixing metal, then they should market themselves at that. And there's a huge market for it. And people who want it, they want that. If a person's really good at mixing pop music, then they should market themselves as that. A person who's good at tuning vocals, a person who's good at playing drums, a person who's good at whatever that best thing you have, that's what you should be doing. Music is just a fraction of the audio requirements and needs in the world. So I think that a lot of blind people are getting into voice acting, they're getting into radio and podcast production, post-production, even video production, content building, all these different things. There's just a ton of different directions you could go.
That's great. And we'll come on to all of that stuff in a minute. So we've seen and heard about On the Moon and IC Music, I guess being the first proper institution in the US where someone who is blind can go and learn music stuff and engineering stuff. I think I'm quite interested in the way that you've managed to grow the business as well across the US and internationally. So you've got trainers on the books all around the world, is that right? And you've got people learning all around the world as well.
Absolutely. Here's the thing. I struggled to find anything close to what we were doing. I think it was fragmented in other parts of the world. I think Cavi had a training, things like that. It existed in pieces. There was no comprehensive program globally that I could find. If anyone knows of one before 2014, a comprehensive program that could take a person who did not use a computer, had not touched a computer a day in their life, and take them to using Pro Tools in 2 months. If there's a program out there that came out before 2014, I'm open to hear that. So I would say that we're the first globally, first of all. Second of all, I would also say that what's interesting even further about this is growing this business. Wow. Selling water to a thirsty person is often a really difficult state to be in. Sometimes people don't know how parched, don't know how dehydrated that they are. Because how can they? Because they're in the state fight or flight mode, survival mode. You can't really operate fluently as far as like, oh yeah, I do need that. I think most people look at it and say, wow, that training costs $30,000. Hey, look, but I'll spend $30,000 over here on this, whatever that is, right? And it kind of comes down to your values, right? So growing a business was really based around understanding my values as Byron Harden is concerned. And, one of my values is really sharing, right? And so that was the window in which this thing was able to really fly through and get out into the ethers. Going to rehab services and saying, hey, look, this training needs to exist. There's a demand. We could prove that. I did that in multiple speeches and presentations and applications and whatever you want to look at. And I said, hey, look, the difference is that we're going to teach navigation. We're not going to step on the toes of an educational institution. We're not going to try to take the place of a school or anything like that. What we want to do is vocational rehabilitation training in the technology world that's specific to audio. It is just that nuance based that it's necessary. And some counselors heard it, some supervisors, some directors, some state directors heard that, and they believed me, and success has been had.
That's great. Thanks so much. So we've got a question from Naima Lee, who is asking, I guess it's a general thing, but also it could be specific to IC Music. Do I need any prior knowledge of music theory to get into music production or study music or engineering courses?
Believe me, some basic knowledge around it absolutely will help you. Because when you start looking at these buttons, what they mean, the timeline just in itself, to understand bars, beats, how things are divided up, how music is counted out, how it's consumed, your life is going to be, much easier. And I'm not saying this to be a smart aleck or anything like that, but, it's the same thing as like, if I want to spend money, should I know how to, do math? Should I know how to count? And I'm not going to say you need to be a calculus major to go and buy a head of lettuce. But what you need to do is you need to understand that 2 + 2 is 4. You need the basics, you need the foundation, you need the fundamentals. This is the brilliance about being blind, is that that's where we are. I think a lot of blindness training skips over that step, the true fundamentals of the framework of whatever it is that's necessary to be trained in.
That's great insight. Thank you very much. So we've got a question in the chat, just picked it up from Michelle. And this might be a good way to introduce what you're trying to do with internships and things like that. So Michelle is asking if you have advice for blind people who want to work in mainstream studios or audio facilities after they've done their training, wherever that may be. People who don't necessarily want to run their own business, they want to work in mainstream environments. Do you know any successful businesses, studios, production companies where there are blind people currently being employed?
I mean, Facebook has audio guys, Disney has audio guys, and I'm talking, these are people that I know that are uniquely able by way of vision. We got to be honest with ourselves. No blind person is going to go be a studio assistant. Wipe that clean from anyone's mind, at least on this presentation, or any other blind person that you guys may run into. A studio assistant, oh my God, no. You cannot drive to the Pizza Hut to grab a pizza for the recording engineer. You can't go and get the coffee without spilling it on the $20,000 Les Paul, or you can't go in and you're knocking over a $35,000 cello. You're pulling cables, and next thing you know, you done pull someone's vintage Zildjian custom cymbal, and now you owe them, $5,000. No, not practical.
It's interesting. Are those scenarios that have happened in your own studio, Byron?
Hey, Jay, you already know. I can only speak it because I know it, right? I do also know that there are a ton of more options than that. And we have to be exploring those from your home. This is what makes audio such an amazing option for blind folks. This is the argument that I've been posing to rehab services here in the United States, is that you can get successful closures with the proper training around this stuff. And so what happens is people are looking, so many jobs that were there in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s, they don't exist. And why don't they exist? So they don't exist because of technology. So technology says that now we're going to change demand, we're going to change supply. When it does that, that means the seesaw goes up on the other side. So when the blind persons before were lacking, now things become, they're able to flourish, more plentiful. And I mean that by way of access to clients, access to employers. in all areas, in all industries. So I would say, really dialing in to what it is that you're good at first. Identify that. And then that will then start to provide, that's that light, that's the headlight to the goal. It's operating in the dark is kind of weird, right? Like as blind people, and that's pun intended, right? And what that looks like is I'm flailing around trying to figure it out. But at the end of the day, hey, guess what? Oh, I put my hands on it. Didn't know it was here. Oh, okay. Now it accesses once again that visual cortex. And that's important because now you create the impression. The impression says, this is the goal. This is where we're going. Okay, we're going to be specific. We're going to edit voice actors who are reading books, who are reading audiobooks. And this is what I'm going to do for a living. I want to charge people, $100 a book to edit a book. I can edit, one book a day. Okay, that's $500 if I'm working 5 days a week. If I'm working 7 days, that's $700. Now, if I said, oh, wow, I can go ahead and times this 3 if I hire somebody, but then I can pay them a little less so I can make me some money for being the aggregator. Now you're the head of your own business. You have employees, you have independent contractors, and now you're bringing in, $2,100 a week. So you can see how this, and this is in all areas. I'm just using a really super generic example.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess you have a very good business sense, or so it seems, Byron. So tell me a little bit about these internships that you want to create and the kind of companies you might work with and the kind of students that you might want to place in those roles.
So I've been in the industry for a while, so I have a lot of contacts, and I just started reaching out to contacts, bars, restaurants, club owners, internet radio providers, and I say, hey, can this blind person get a residency here, once a week, and just pay them like $150, because then over here in rehab services will then kick like another $100. And, and then we're looking to supplement that too through our foundation with even further. So a person can end up with, $250, $300 a night to spend on a Monday night at a club or a bar or some type of restaurant. And so that's how I kind of kicked off the apprenticeship program. And we don't, over here, they're kind of getting away from internship. They're going more into apprenticeship because it kind of implies that, hey, look, this person's going to have a paid position at the end of this training. But the reality is that it's the same thing. I will say that, if I were to say companies, that would be pretty difficult. Now, there's a company, I'm not going to mention who they are, but they are more than open to talking to individuals that we vet. Just because, the owner, we sit on an advisory board together. So, it's those types of things. I think also if we're talking about audio, as far as the production side in the studio and recording, you got air gigs and things like that. And I know people hate to hear that, and Fiverr and stuff like that. But the reality is what you're looking to do is bring in a community. Not enough people are looking at this as a small business. And in these apprenticeship positions, you have to still operate just like that. And the reason why is because you're not going to get a W-2 from these folks. You're looking to get a pretty consistent 1099 from them.
Cool. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it'd be good also to talk a little bit about how IC Music is evolving and you're expanding and you're having a kind of sister company as well, IC Courses, which is going to do, I guess, more wider tech training and also work with a wider range of individuals as well. And that's the main reason why your website is down at the moment, because you're rebranding, right?
Sure. Yeah. And IC Courses is going to be the overall kind of brand for the training, like you said. It's not really another company. It's just another way to put people's minds and not having people that have to think and work so hard about what this is. IC Music, obviously, we'll continue with the MPEP program, which is the music production and engineering program for the totally blind. We will continue with that training. We are expanding on that training. We're moving into some really cool partnerships, with some really cool folks who are helping us to expand, both helping with the website stuff and with some training. And there we will be into AI, bot training, things like that, doing some video editing and things of that nature. So, we're excited about that. We're moving into training seniors on mobile devices and young students as well on computers, desktop stuff, tablets, things like that. Just conventional things, allowing people true access. And the reason why that's the case is because how intense our training is. I think that we've been able to cover an area, a pretty vast area, with some really cool techniques, some proprietary techniques that we've come up with, and myself and these trainers. We have like 10 trainers working for us right now, and I'm telling you, these guys and gals are, whew, it's jaw dropping. The knowledge. And all I can do is just try to hang on. It's a wild horse, man. I'm telling you, Jay. I'm flailing all over the place. My feet is up in the air. It's just like a good thing, though.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned earlier with music production stuff, there's often an initial step which it's easy to try and jump that initial hurdle, which is getting really comfortable using whatever device it is you're using generally in the operating system. So if you're using a Mac, before you jump into Logic or Pro Tools or Reaper or whatever, it is just being super confident with that tech generally. If you want to use your iPad to record on GarageBand, is making sure you're really proficient with VoiceOver first before you jump into what is actually quite a complex program for anyone to use. So yeah, I think that's great. A couple of questions again from Lee Strickland. So one in the chat asking whether IC courses will be accessible online for overseas students.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely. And we're moving into some self-paced courses too, which are going to be much more palatable financially for folks, because that's a sharp taste. Those higher dollar amounts. I do understand. I think also the thing about those dollar amounts is that we pay our trainers very, very well. They get 50%, of the training. I can say that in public. And I think that's necessary. I value expertise, and these gals and these guys, they have it. I think that's how I would want to be treated. I view myself important, but I view them just as important. I think that this is more of a partnership, how I look at it. Even my first trainer that I hired, which was Kevin Reeves. I was like, hey, man, I came to him and he helped me devise a curriculum, and I copywrote that curriculum, but I put him on the copyright as well. So he has ownership. So if I ever sell that particular curriculum, he would definitely get 50% of that. And that's the way I operate as a human being. I think that's fair.
Yeah. No, it's good to see an insight into your business brain as well as your creative brain. So Lee again is asking, I guess, given that sight loss very often occurs alongside other access requirements, have you got any tips for working with young people who maybe have additional needs, and how, like, ways of supporting them to learn industry skills and help them to integrate into the music industry?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing is, what I would do is I would really, really dial in to what they're interested in, because who does not want to be paid attention to in that way? That's the very first thing. Now you win their trust, because you want people to trust you, especially individuals who are uniquely able, because we're so accustomed to quite the opposite. Then two, they have to feel like their voice matters, because guess what? It does, right? It just does. So once you figure that part out, the tech stuff is pretty easy to figure out from there. There's multiple resources to check into, different techniques that people are sharing. Like I said, we're working on a repository around that kind of stuff. And I think that right there will get us to exactly where we would need to be. How that person's communicating now, that child, really figure out and pay attention, see what they default to. If a kid they come in and let's just say they have some cognitive issues and they come in and they're humming a particular melody. Well, they might, you listen to what the hum kind of sounds like. And I'm just giving a really generic example, but this is how I kind of operate. If they're saying, doo, 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 I'm kind of thinking that sounds percussive and it sounds like piano. So I'm like, hey, you want to check out the piano? or hey, you sound like if they're saying woo, 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 maybe it's a wind instrument, maybe it's their vocal cords that they want to use. And excuse the singing. I apologize to you all for that. But in any event, really dial in at that level, because I'm telling you, it's necessary.
Thank you, Byron. Just to give you some context, so I've been working with kids who live with blindness and low vision, as well as additional complex needs, for over 15 years, and just started a program last year for kids finishing high school and young adults post-school who are VI with an intellectual disability, because there is nowhere in Australia for them to continue learning if they can't access our local TAFE colleges, which I think you guys call something else college. So in terms of knowing them well, building these relationships, knowing best how they learn, that's all, that stuff's really cool. I just, more to the point, was what doors would you say are the least complicated or overwhelming? Basically, I've been using GarageBand and Logic just to start, even basic loops. This is, press O, cool, you've got loops, copy and paste, as well as accessing MIDI through Complete Control and native instruments. But are there any that you would, apart from Reaper, I hear now, that is less overwhelming and less tricky for someone to navigate?
So now that question is that's interesting. Are you looking to have these persons to be independent?
As independent as possible. So some with varying degrees of support, depending on their physical needs as well. Yeah, it's tricky when someone's also got hemiplegia, so for the keyboard shortcuts. But yeah, as independent as possible. And the goal for this program is not for them to become professional engineers. I mean, that would be great if they want to. It's more about giving them an opportunity to learn. It's very literacy based as well, basically creating community events to do with music. So I'll just give you an example. They are, as a group, creating an EDM dance party. But I said, cool, you can only use the music that you compose, and I'll teach you how to do that. What else do you need? You need to learn emailing, you need to learn budgeting, all the rest of it. So it's like a complete literacy, numeracy-based course, but of course, music is always the carrot. It is for my life anyway. So yeah, and I know it is for these young people.
So
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And there is an application that comes to mind that I was asked to consult on for this very thing. And it's called Ear something. I can't think of the name of it. But what I will do, I'll get that link and I'll send it to you. I believe it's free, especially if it's in the education department. But the University of Georgia worked on the accessibility. And they used students from California School for the Blind as a testing ground. And so Northwestern University asked me to consult around it and its accessibility and usability. So, but it looks really amazing and it's super straightforward.
Oh, that's so cool. Thank you so much, Byron. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Lee, I wonder, have you ever explored the resources? So there's an organisation in the UK called Technology in Music Education, TIME. And yeah, obviously you don't want to choose something that is going to limit someone's capability to, I guess, get into the professional world. But there's a lot of tools on there that are really good to get people going and thinking about like the principles of sequencing and stuff like that. So I'm thinking of, there's one called Beat Blocks, which is like an augmented reality type thing. You put your phone camera or iPad camera over your Lego board and you can stick Lego bricks on, and all those Lego bricks will create samples, and the board is like a sequencer. And there's quite a few different things like that to kind of teach the principles, which might be good to try. Okay, well, I'm just going to come back to a couple of other questions. I think some of the stuff we've been talking about is general inclusive best practice anyway. So I guess finding a way of leading studio sessions or classes that are great for any type of learner or musician. So there's a couple of questions that are around that broad topic. One is from Lynn Davis. She's asking, if you ever have sighted producers or musicians use your studio, which I assume you do, how do you make sure they respect your accessible space and keep it accessible for other people that are in there at the same time?
Tell them not to put drinks around the console.
That's an easy one.
Because, I use Apple, right? So, you just shut the screen reader off and the computer's behaving as a sighted person would want it to. Another thing that I do to train sighted producers is, I use a screen curtain. And so, having a screen curtain on, they can't access the visual side of production while I'm on the computer. So when they get in the driver's seat and it comes off, there's another level of respect that just happens from understanding, like, whoa, okay, man, okay, wow. It just brings them into another space. But I definitely, at the door, first thing I say is to instrumentalists, to producers, hey, look, you got stuff, you're bringing your tools along, cool. Stage them here. If it's drinks, keep them in the kitchenette. If it's food, keep it in the kitchenette. I don't want to come in as a blind person, especially a person who owns the stuff, and knock over, a cup of water just because someone's not paying attention. And then that's kind of a thing, And then, like I said, using that screen curtain, they're really interested at that point, and they're really cognizant of, like, wow, I better be careful here. It just seems to work. I don't know why, but.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. And a question from Catherine Sturman. She is asking, she's saying that she's really keen on working with organisations internationally to focus on inclusive music best practice. Have you got any recommendations of organisations to follow or get in touch with in terms of that inclusive best practice?
I think RAMPed is a great organization, RAM, I think it's PD, which is something accessible music professionals.
I think it's recording and music professionals with disabilities.
Yeah, with disabilities. Yes, that's it. Yeah, Lachi is amazing. They are amazing. A lot of them are part of the Recording Academy. So yeah, that I think that's an amazing start. And a lot of them work internationally, so they'll have additional insight that I probably don't have.
Cool. Thank you so much. And Catherine as well, I would look at the program. So Berkeley College up in Boston they're running a conference next month called Able Assembly, and they've got a lot of international representation there on the program. So I would look at who is on the program there if you want to get out of the UK bubble.
Oh, is she based in the UK?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I just wanted to get, I work with a lot of different people in the UK, but I just think it's always so interesting to learn from other people around the world, basically what they're doing and how to be better.
Yeah. No, believe me, I get it. I think another cool resource, depending on, your area of expertise, is those WhatsApp groups. There are a ton of them, all different areas, specializing in each area, and they're blind, all blind production, right? So,
Yeah.
DJing to, all these different things. And there's just so many of everyone there, from India to China to Vietnam to America to Canada to the UK, Italy. I mean, they're all over the place.
Amazing. That sounds great. Thank you.
Absolutely. And whatever, whatever area of expertise that you're in, I can, give that information as well. So, get a lot more granular in your approach.
Cool. Thank you so much. So we're beginning to run short of time. So I'm going to just quickly scan over the questions that we had in advance, see if there's any that are jumping out at me that we haven't had a chance to go through yet. So apologies if we haven't had a chance to answer your question. We'll go to some raised hands. And if you feel like we haven't answered your question, please raise your hand again now. So first in the queue, we have Michelle Felix.
Hello, everyone. This has been really informative, and I've really loved. This is my first time in Sound Without Sight, and I'm really excited to find spaces like this. I kind of just wanted to share a resource that things are becoming a little bit more inclusive now in the mainstream world. For example, last December, I got the chance to attend the conference. This is for Live Sound, live at Lidditz in Pennsylvania in the US. And this had a whole panel on disabilities, more on the live sound sector for people with disabilities or chronic illness who were wanting to or touring. and it was very welcoming towards disability in general. And I just basically wanted to inform people that I have seen blind people being successful in mainstream studios. For example, I know a couple guys from Australia who are blind, and they have been in studios either as session musicians or as the engineers, and just kind of invite everybody to not lose the hope that that blind people and sighted people can work together, and it's really one same world that we share. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be here. So thank you for making this space and this wonderful community.
Awesome. Wow.
No, thank you so much, Michelle. That's great. And I'm very glad you were able to make it along today. And I hope you can come along to future sessions. And yeah, I think that the point that you were talking about, Byron, about the traditional way that people might get fed into studio roles through that assistant type thing, that particular pathway might not be the most accessible, but there are a million ways to get round that and find alternate routes. And I think, yeah, within studios, within any particular role, we had a particular question about mastering. And yes, I know people who do mastering who are blind or partially sighted. Yeah, I think any particular role, you can certainly find ways to overcome the barriers.
For sure. Yeah, mastering, as a matter of fact, it's where one would really care about the ears. I think also philosophically, people are starting to get away from the louder, the better. There are some, you still have to have those abilities. I understand LUFS, the meters, that's difficult to find apps that's accessible for that. I've used Glenn Sheck a lot, who's done like Justin Bieber. He's done Drake. He's a ton of people. Michael Jackson. He's mastered a lot of records, and he's mastering this stuff on analog. When you're paying him, $350 a single, and this is a top tier guy paying, and that's not a lot of money for a single, but he will take that into the analog room and run it through the circuitry there. And can a blind person do that? Heck yeah.
Absolutely. And hand up from Marshall.
Yeah, very, very good talk so far, Byron. I've really enjoyed it. It's definitely given me some insights to take back to studios I'm working out of at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How often do you go into, I guess not often since you've got your own great facility, but let's say you're going into a sighted person's space and they have absolutely no clue about accessibility or very little clue about accessibility. How do you kind of prefer to tell them what you need, and how much of that stuff do you take along? So for example, let's just say you're going into a big studio in London and you need to work out of there for a few days. Will you, if they can support it, will you just be like, okay, I'm just going to take my laptop and hook that up to your system and then hook up the HDMI, and then, got the best of both worlds. I've got my accessible stuff, you've got your screen, and then that's the end of that.
So,
because I do go in various different studios at the moment.
Sure. Well, one thing, Marshall, I'm going to tell you, man, what I do, and this is what we train on too as well, which is preparation. If it's possible to tour the facility before you go, like a day or two before, or because I understand studios are constantly turning over. So gear may look different on the floor, what the storage room, what the, mic closets look like, things like that. But what I would say is that, understanding first your needs, right? And most facilities will have their runners have things in place, or the interns, they'll have them placed proper, right? What I would also look at is I look at all the indicators in the room, things that I'm looking for as a blind person. Like I'm looking for shorelines for drum rugs and drum risers. I'm looking for in the corner maybe a ton of mic stands, or oversized stage boom stands. And I know that they're not going to be moving those around on a constant basis. So if I'm there 2 days before, chances are that's probably going to be there. So I don't poke my eye out. I'm looking for what type of mic stands they have, what, types of clips, types of mics, things like that. cable runs. I'm looking at how, things may be set up. I would want to come in and see how they're setting their sessions up. Because a lot of times they understand what their rooms sound like, of course, more than we do. And so I kind of follow those leads, and if it's wood floors, I'm looking at the pattern of the floors and really drawing this, again, accessing my visual cortex, trying to impress upon an image that I need. So then when I go back, I can kind of dial in. I'm asking how high are the ceilings, what is the acoustic agents in the ceiling? These are things that I think are necessary for me to obtain the result. And most studios are so accommodating. Of course, they want their dollar, and things, their demand is getting lower and lower. So, they seem to be really on board with making sure that things make sense. And then in the control room, it's the same thing. But, if I'm able to access their gear, I'll do that. And, and I prefer to take a sighted guy along with me. Most of the time when I'm in other studios, it's with my band. Or if I'm needing to record something, a large space with, like strings and stuff like that, or a grand piano, because I don't have those things. I'll do it like that. But, this is a discussion that we have at Full Sail University quite a bit. I sit on the board of advisors there and really aiding them along and training their blind students, preparing them for production. And they've gotten really good at, putting mics exactly back where they were. As a matter of fact, it's part of their grade. You know what I mean? So I think that level of awareness really makes sense too as well.
Yeah, that is so interesting because I've never really paid that much attention as, an engineer in his early 20s, the first thing that naturally I gravitate towards is, what gear have you got? Are you running an SSL or are you running something else? I've never actually really stopped to think and gravitated towards like thinking about the actual room and how the room is set up. I've always been like, oh, that mic stands there. Well, I might not have put it there, but I just deal with it. Because I'm just so grateful that these people let me go into their venues and let me use their stuff. So I most of the time, I guess I don't say stuff that I probably should say,
or
that I probably should ask.
I'll tell you another trick, Marshall. Aside from asking for a gear list, because most of them have a gear list readily available. I have on house shoes right now, right?
Yeah.
The reason I wear house shoes in the studio is so that I can feel the cables under my feet and I can feel the direction of the floor. But if it's like parquet floors or, like a tile floor or something like that, then again, I'm using rugs that they may have, things like that. And if they don't have them, if I notice that they don't have them, I will bring my own. We do that a lot, I own like 8x10 rugs. And people are like, "Well, what are you guys trying to do? Who do you think you are?" Like I'm a blind dude trying to figure my way out around here. So get out the way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And one studio I'm working out of at the moment is having so many issues with its computer because they are running HDX. So I'm actually trying to get them to pay for an external container for the HDX card.
Yeah.
So that. Because then, whatever engineer comes in, like me, a young person up and coming, or whether it's somebody who's been working with like Slipknot or someone like that, even though we're probably never going to get one of those because we're like a small time youth arts centre studio in Mansfield that doesn't do a lot of commercial recordings anymore. I'm like, my philosophy is like, if one of those comes in, I want them to have an easy session. So I want them to just be able to plug into our HDX and boom, that's it. They're on.
Did you say Slipknot?
Yeah, I do like Slipknot. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah,
we've never had anyone that's worked with Slipknot before. I think the biggest one we've had is someone who worked with Status Quo, but that's still big. But in all the examples, like in any situation, I want those guys to have an easy session at our studio. So yeah.
No, I just thought it was interesting you mentioned him because I know Sean from the group. And
Sean Clown, nice.
Yeah. And we recorded out the same studio. It was a studio on a farm out in the middle of Iowa. They're from Iowa.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What album was that on, if you don't mind me asking? Just as a curious.
So they were, I forgot what album they were recording. This was back in 2011-ish.
Yeah, that would have probably been the Grey Chapter then. They'd have probably been writing for the Grey Chapter because they'd recently lost Paul, and unfortunately Joey was going downhill.
Yeah, they had a lot. My band is called Blah Blah Blah, and we came in and we just used the house gear, but these guys came in. They had 3 Pro Tools rigs. It was insane the amount of stuff that they had, but it was out of control. But the fact of the matter is that it's funny that you named them.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think how those sessions would go, because I have a vision of, what would I do on the drums, what would I do on the guitars, and I'd probably run everything through one Pro Tools rig, or at least I'd attempt to, unless somebody corrected me. It's interesting to hear you say they had like 3 of them going.
Yeah.
It's totally a different kettle of fish, and when you have artists who are already established, and suddenly all the stops get pulled out, and it's such a different production process, and that can have knock-on effects on the creative process as well. Like when you have record labels saying you need to record in a certain way so that we can have an isolated vocal or like an isolated instrumental for like sync opportunities and stuff like that. It's a different world. So we're a little bit over time. Apologies, we've gone over time, Byron. I hope that's okay. But I'm gonna draw the Q&A to a close there and just say thank you so much for your time. And did you have any closing words?
No, but thank you, Jay, for this. This is always a fun thing to kind of talk about, individuals and the philosophy around audio who are uniquely abled. And I think that at the end of the day, all of this stuff is possible, no doubt. But and success is possible. And I just hope that people understand that success is not getting a Grammy. Success is not, it's not that you made, $1 billion. Success is when you get to a place and you're able to communicate your passion in ways that make sense to someone and they find it relevant, whether it's one person. I don't care if you put out a YouTube presentation and only one person follows you and that person contacts you and said, man, you just changed my life. I was about to unlive myself and you stopped that. You were successful then, I'm telling you. Or if you think successful, I'm not going to say successful is not making $1 billion, because if you feel like you want to make $1 billion, then you have to do the things that it takes to do that. And once you hit $1 billion, then yes, success. But I just want people to know that success is ubiquitous. It's not this really narrow thing.
That's really good advice. Thank you so much. So Byron, thank you again. I'm really looking forward to seeing where IC Music goes and IC courses as well. They sound like they're going to be really useful resources, and I would love to collaborate on some of those as well and promote them through Sound Without Sight. And
absolutely
look forward to working together in the future. So thank you so very much, Byron, and we will catch up soon.
All right, man. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sound Without Sight podcast. Sound Without Sight is a community-driven online knowledge hub, collating information and resources to support blind and partially sighted musicians and audio engineers to break down access barriers. If you're a visually impaired musician or audio engineer, why not share some solutions you've found on our knowledge hub? You can learn more and get involved at soundwithoutsight.org. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, please consider making a donation to support the project. You can do so at soundwithoutsight.org/donate. The music you're listening to was kindly contributed by community member Mackie Jones of MapleMixProductions.com.